You know, like anyone with a soul, I loved the Toy Story movies. A deep and insightful character study of a central character built on the backdrop of what toys do when children aren't looking is so simple and utterly genius. With this alone, they managed to make a series of films that were emotionally fulfilling and coherent with the lessons and characters that made the films feel almost tangible. And they also made Toy Story 4! That aside, one thing was for sure throughout each of the films. Adults could appreciate the thoughtful progression and familiar life lessons that its characters go through, while a generation of kids can similarly gain something by sitting in their rooms, quietly torturing their toys into springing to life, just like the movies. Look, Buzz just misunderstood a metaphor. Oh, Buzz, you're so silly. Speaking of Buzz, this video's talking about Lightyear. When I heard that this film was being made, my and basically the entire internet's reaction to this was a hearty I mean, I can see the reaction Disney executives had when Pixar pitched them this movie. Why, Pixar? Why would you do this to such a beloved and profitable franchise? Wait a minute. And Lightyear was born. I may have hated hearing it was getting made, but I saw it because, let's be honest, this is Pixar we're talking about, and they always make good stuff, except the things that aren't. And you know what? It was actually pretty meh, not their best work, but despite its glaring issues, Lightyear manages to stick the landing on a couple of wins, including the most unexpected piece of symbolism I have ever witnessed in an animated film. But before we get to that, I need to put some meat sandwiches on the table, and now I can, because this video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. Raid's leading the charge to a true console-level experience on your phone with a robust selection of unique champions. The newest addition to Raid, and my personal favorite, is legendary champion from the High Elves faction, Deliana, one of the strongest support champions in the entire game. And just in time, Raid's running a special Deliana Chase event where all you have to do is log in and play Raid for 7 days between now and July 28th, and you'll get Deliana for free. Also, all new players of Raid can enter promo code MyDeliana to get 50 XP brews to instantly get your legendary hero Deliana to max level 50 plus a ton of silver. On top of that, Raid's running a huge series of Summer Splash events for the whole month, where you can get your hands on some incredible skins for everyone's favorite dwarf, Trunda. So what are you waiting for? Click my link in the description or scan my QR code here and you'll get unique bonuses worth $30, including a free epic champion Aina, so you can summon some awesome champions as soon as you play. Thank you to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. And now we return to your regularly scheduled review of this fun mess of a movie. Look, Lightyear had the double whammy of 1, being based on an existing beloved property, and B, being Pixar's big return to theaters instead of Turning Red. I really like Turning Red. It tells a deeply relatable story to a degree of unapologetic honesty that even I, as a man, can appreciate even if the story wasn't catered to me. It's brimming with heart, care, and authenticity, so I can understand that team's frustration of being sidelined compared to what almost everyone else would consider the safe choice. Because of this, instead of being able to just enjoy a Pixar movie, we now have to ask ourselves, does this movie even justify its own existence? Not a great start, and hardly seems worth the inconvenience, and box office numbers seem to agree, but I gave it a chance anyway, and even found something very important that not enough people are talking about when discussing this movie. We'll get to that in a bit, but first, let's establish what this movie even is. Lightyear is about Buzz Lightyear, a space ranger who, in his mission to take his people home, gets in over his head and accidentally ends up crashing their ship on a hostile alien planet. This destroys their only method of hyperspace travel, and so the crew end up establishing a colony and try to create a new, stable hyperspace crystal using resources from the planet. It's up to Buzz to test these crystals and finish the mission to get these colonists home, while also making amends for his previous failure. Things don't go as expected, and when an army of alien robots led by the mysterious Zurg show up, it's up to Buzz and his ragtag team to take them down. All in all, what you get from this is a fast-paced, sometimes a little bit too much for its own good, but I'll get to that, and genuinely fun sci-fi adventure. Let's start with the good stuff though, and there is good here. The animation is expectedly absolutely gorgeous and is especially apparent in the scenes when flying through space. Not to mention the texture detailing on just about every object in this movie is breathtaking. This goes twofold for the incredibly realistic looking hair on Alicia and Izzy in particular. Black hair has traditionally not been well represented in animation, so it's nice to see that getting this done right was a priority for the studio. And speaking of representation, this movie also has the honor of featuring Pixar's first on-screen lesbian kiss, which was really awesome to see, even if it only happened, and I do mean only, after Disney pissed off tons of people with that stunt in Florida. I also really like the central message of this movie. Yeah, we make mistakes, and sometimes the hardest person to convince to move on can be yourself. But allowing yourself to be consumed by it and detaching yourself from reality just isn't a good way to live, for yourself and everyone around you. Furthermore, sidekick characters can be really hit or miss in animated movies. Buzz's crew is honestly pretty forgettable, with maybe the exception of Izzy, who at the very least is charismatic and serves as Alicia's physical reinforcement of the central theme of moving forward. And I guess Mo has a bit about a pen whose payoff can be seen coming from a galaxy away. It's not as funny as you'd wish, though. Needless to say, I fully expect to forget their names and existence within the week. However, Socks the robot cat is just so good. His jokes land every time, he never lingers on screen too long to get annoying, and he actually helps the team over and over again, to the point where he feels more useful than just about every character in this movie. Whenever Buzz is in trouble, Socks has been the solution almost every time. Almost to a fault, which is where we now shift to the not so good stuff, including that whenever Buzz is in trouble, Socks has been the solution almost every time. Blast doors won't close? Boom! Socks has got it. Need to repair a ship? You know Socks is on top of that. Buzz needs to be rescued from the clutches of Zurg? Yeah, Socks can apparently do that too? A few solutions here and there are understandable, but at a certain point he starts to feel like a real Deus Ex Machina machine. Think I'm being too harsh? Okay, you know what? I can get that Socks was given commander-level authorization privileges thanks to Alicia Hawthorne, so that's how he has access to just about every door and system in this movie. I can accept that. But you're telling me, after decades of technological advancements and multiple generations of scientists, this hopelessly outdated standard issue companion bot with admin privileges managed to solve one of the most perplexing and pressing military pursuits of all time because someone asked them to? Did no one else think to do this? Even ignoring the technological advancements over, remember, decades of time, you're telling me that there wasn't a single computer or AI more technologically robust than a companion bot to help in calculating this life or death priority alpha issue? Really? And on top of that, this seemingly galaxy-brained catbot, in his infinite and beyond wisdom, not only didn't bother remembering this critical formula he worked endlessly on, but he didn't save a backup of it the entire time he was working on it? Okay, you know what? This movie wouldn't happen otherwise, so we'll just take this feeling of utter befuddlement and just shoot it with a well-timed tranq dart. But while we're talking about odd character developments, let's talk about the title character in this movie. Buzz's motivation makes sense implicitly and on paper, but it really falls apart when viewing it practically in the film. He wants to make amends for stranding everyone on this planet, and he feels that completing his mission of getting everyone home is his cross to bear, and that he owes it to everyone to set things right. The only issue is that no one holds him to this. There's not a single character in this movie that blames him or is bitter over what happened other than himself. I suppose it's fine that it exists as more of a personal feeling of failure, but it really would have been good for the film to validate his feelings, especially considering how AWOL he goes over it. Which, by the way, also feels pointless considering that the major development of cracking hyperspace travel could have been something that Buzz brought up to ask for one more shot at seeing if they could complete their mission, rather than becoming a fugitive without even trying. This repeated shark jumping logic is a problem, but the film has two other major issues that I need to make time for. Namely that the film fails at eliciting an emotional response, a very critical part of most of Pixar's films. To be honest, the pieces are in place. It's not like the elements of a touching story about reconciling with yourself and moving forward aren't there. You just don't feel it, because Lightyear fittingly moves much too quickly for its emotional moments to stick. This movie feels like it runs at a breakneck pace from start to finish. In any given situation, it almost immediately changes your attention to the next thing, giving the audience no time to process what just happened. Buzz just committed the biggest mistake of his career and is experiencing a breakdown. Within 5 minutes, 10 tops, we're in space now. Buzz is continually haunted by his mistake with nightmares. Nope, it's been 2 minutes, we need to go back to space. With better pacing and structure, I think that this film could have touched my heart. But alas, it's been almost 2 minutes, so we need to move on to the next thing. Lightyear made the rules, not me. Lastly, and this one's a pretty big doozy because it's the entire third act, but Zurg just doesn't work. Without getting into spoilers, I do appreciate that the film did try to make the Toy Story 2 twist feel more sensible in this movie, but yikes, I almost prefer that to what we ended up getting. Zurg just pops up out of absolutely nowhere in the second act, and doesn't even make consistent appearances until Act 3, despite his entire reasoning for being there pretty much encouraging him to. And this might have been acceptable if he was at the very least well written, but the logic behind so many different occurrences for this Zurg to happen requires next level shark jumping, like around the sun and back jumping. How he got to where Buzz was is explained with a wave of the arm dismissal, and his entire reasoning for being there somehow makes even less sense than that. He would have had no reason to make the decisions he did because it actively went against his entire motivation, and his plan was so nonsensical that I refuse to believe that this character thought it was a good idea. And even if Zurg really thought it's a good plan, he already had all the tools he needed to do what he wanted. What made him think that getting to Buzz would somehow be any easier or provide some sort of a solution rather than just using the things he already had? This logic is so flawed that even socks can't fix this. Easily the worst Pixar antagonist in years. Okay, not great, but maybe Lightyear will fare better against one of the most important elements of a good sci-fi romp: the setting and atmosphere. The story mainly takes place on the hostile alien world that they land on. Brief, albeit beautiful shots in space, and the Zurg ship. This is fine, with my only gripe being that I wish that there was a bit more variety in the setting. I mean, the planet is literally all dirt and rocks with the occasional jungle and lava pit here and there. There's a point in the movie where Buzz and his crew go to commandeer an armadillo ship, and the outside looks almost copy-pasted from a point earlier in the movie when Buzz is prepping for his first test flight. Sure, the designs for the places explored in the movie may be more realistic, but they lack that pop of variety, making them pretty boring overall. The Zurg ship isn't much better, just basically a collection of tall, gray, industrial-style hallways. You know, to contrast the collection of tall, gray, NASA-style buildings we spent time in on the planet, and that's totally different. Oh, and that's another issue. If we're supposed to empathize with the idea that the people living on the planet have moved on and actually think of it as home, then why didn't the film bother naming said planet? It might have been said once throughout the film, but I guarantee you 90% of the audience doesn't even know what it's called. If Pixar didn't care enough to even name the place, then why should we? Setting isn't everything though. After all, there are countless sci-fi stories out there, and creating a sci-fi feeling is often more important than anything else. This is where Lightyear did a much better job at. Yeah, the hostile alien lifeforms, including the bug creatures, underground vine monster, and Zurg bots are cool and fit pretty comfortably in this type of story, but to me, what makes or breaks whether or not I get invested into an entry of this genre is the little things. And dang nabbit Pixar, you done it again! This is the same studio that made WALL-E, and that movie did a fantastic job at immersing you into its world by adapting its futuristic setting and technologies into something that felt familiar and believable. It's no surprise that Lightyear's technology is similarly fun and inventive, like the snap-to-cook meals and development of robotic companions to relieve the loneliness of the colonists. But by far, the best example has to be the autopilot that Buzz has to blow into like a game cartridge when it doesn't work properly. Oh, that felt so relatable, and it's just chef's kiss. These sensible technologies may only be a small part of the world of Lightyear, but they implicitly make the world feel more realized and immersive, making them some of the most important elements of the film. So yeah, Lightyear did a much better job at evoking a realized sci-fi environment. I only wish we saw more things like that because it feels a little half-baked. The film could have done with just a little bit more of that trademark Pixar out-of-the-box approach to this tried-and-true formula. So, after covering some of the most important elements in this film, the characters, story, setting, and animation, we now have to revisit the question we were faced at the beginning of this video. Does this movie justify its own existence? Most people would say no. The positives, like the gorgeous visuals and genuinely fantastic socks, aren't things that feel unique to this setting. It's way too fast-paced to let its moments of anguish and triumph sink in, making the emotional resonance of the film feel non-existent. And the repeated senseless decisions and Deus Ex Machina that pop up throughout the film makes the writing feel inconsistent at best, and a sign of larger structural story issues at worst. Sure, it does feel like Lightyear could have fit as an animated movie that Andy saw and loved within the Toy Story universe, but it just makes no sense that the only characters we see from that universe are Buzz and Zurg if it really did. Oh, and also the father continuity error would be a thing too. So that's it then. It doesn't justify its own existence? Well, dear viewer, we're not done just yet. As you can guess from the title, I've been saving the juiciest part for last. A seemingly dumb, quirky, and insignificant detail that made me hesitate jumping on the hate train. And that detail is the meat sandwich, which, yes, represents Buzz's character development and the larger thematic messaging of the entire film. Yeah, I know I kinda hate that I just said that sentence unironically too, but it's true. If there's one thing that Pixar's good at, it's utilizing carefully constructed symbolism to reinforce their themes. Sometimes this is accomplished through characters, but sometimes it's done through utilizing environmental storytelling. Take WALL-E again, for example. Hands down, the studio's best user of environmental storytelling thus far. The dangers of humanity becoming lazy and gluttonous are a huge part of the messaging of WALL-E. So the hover chairs feel like a natural extension of that world, while also being an exacerbator of this issue. That's just one example, but it's a good one in that it shows how important a seemingly insignificant detail can be to not only immersing your audience, but also emphasizing the purpose of your film. This is where Lightyear similarly employs this approach with the meat sandwich. Up to that point in the movie, Buzz has spent his time lamenting the planet he marooned them on because it stood as a reflection of his mistake. But like I said, during the film, no one holds it against him, and he was repeatedly told how this planet was already home for the people living there. It never sinks in though. Up until Mo hands him the most ridiculous thing he's ever seen in over 80 years. 2 pieces of meat with bread in the middle. He laughs it off as a nonsensical concept, only to be met with an unexpected ridicule from his companions, at which point it becomes evident that what this sandwich represents is Buzz's continued disconnect from humanity. His entire existence seems to revolve around Space Ranger work, the most important role of his time, the infinity and beyond. But it wasn't until this sandwich that he recognizes just how much the world around him has moved on, and he's refused to accept it. Alicia loved being a ranger just as much as him. She knew its significance, and yet she found a life that fulfilled her. One that Buzz couldn't understand up until that moment. His mistake became their salvation, and thanks to the meat sandwich, he finally understood that. And you know what? It was better than he thought. Do I think that this genuinely well thought out symbolism is enough to keep me from joining the "it doesn't need to exist" club? No. The other issues are still withstanding and significant. But I must admit, it was right on Pixar's trademark brand of unexpected brilliance, and it did make me hesitate saying it. No, Lightyear doesn't need to exist, but you'll probably have fun with it anyway. But for the love of all that is Hootie, Pixar, do not make a second one. I'm giving Lightyear a 6 out of 10. It's good, but not great. Not by a long shot. Subscribe so I can afford a meat sandwich. I've been Danny K, and remember to do something nice for yourself today. Sorry that this video was a bit late and I hadn't made anything in a while. It seems that I caught something pretty nasty going around that had me stuck in bed for quite some time. Anyway, I'm better now, so you'll be seeing more stuff from me consistently from now on. Like new Owl House video next week soon. Thank you all for your patience. I'm glad to be back, and I'll see you all to infinity and beyond.